Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Careers and Coffee. I'm absolutely thrilled to be welcoming Dan English on today to be talking to us all about the finance sector, his role with us as an enterprise advisor, the fantastic mentoring he does with us. So let's welcome Dan to talk a little bit more about him.
Hi Jordan, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Excellent, thank you. It's a good start today. The sun's shining and I'm here with you, or somewhere with you. I'm here, you're there.
You're like in the like virtual cloud somewhere.
Yes.
It's all happening. So are you back in the office? Are you at home? Whereabouts are you?
I've been back in since the middle of June. It was becoming a little bit strange trying to get some work done with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old pretty much running around shouting and playing games. So calls like this weren't the most effective trying to tell clients that I might be interrupted by a naked child coming running into my bedroom. So it was good fun for a little while, but the novelty soon wore off.
I can imagine after a few months, I think it would start to drive me up the wall a little bit. But no, brilliant to see you back in the office, back at work. So, I mean, tell me a little bit more about you. You know, who are you? What's your current roles? Who's Dan?
So I'm an Ipswich boy, born and bred. I was educated at Hillside Primary School, went to St Joseph's College for high school, and then got into accountancy straight from that. So did my training at Ensor's Chartered Accountants, and I was there for about 7 or 8 years, moved on to KPMG, and then I've had a few roles in industry before taking the plunge and working for myself effectively the last 3.5 years. So my role at the moment is as director of Contador Accountancy Services. So there's a range of workflows that I have, from projects helping out clients with audit work to consultancy, where it might be an interim financial controller role or FD role where somebody leaves and company's in a little bit of trouble from a resource viewpoint. So it's gone a little bit quiet on that front at the moment because obviously there tends to be more leaving than replacing. So given these current difficult times, but then we've also got a steady workflow of accounts work. So what I call your bog standard accountancy practice work, which is all good fun and interesting, but I've got quite a nice varied work stream.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, I forgot to ask, have you got coffee, tea, a beverage? You know, you can't come on Careers and Coffee without it.
I've got tea and water. Sadly, I didn't buy biscuits or sweets or chocolate, so I tend to be better if I'm hosting someone, but it's better for my waistline this way.
That's right. I'll send you some bourbons in the post. Right. So, I mean, so you talk about, you're director of Contador Accountancy, but what does an average day look like for you?
So my work is usually quite easy to plan, which can be nice. I like the variety at times. So what I'm missing the most at the moment is getting to meet people. So I know the stereotype of an accountant is that we sit in an office with our head down, leave us alone, we'll bash the calculator and spreadsheets, which, don't get me wrong, that gets some people off, but that's not my bag. But I quite like getting out and meeting people. So this is the current way of meeting people, clearly. So there's been a few Zoom calls and catch-ups and such like, but a lot of it at the moment has been accelerating the year-end timetables of clients. So I think by getting some time back from businesses struggling a little bit, they're getting on top of some of the back office things that they usually wouldn't get to until later. So we've had an abundance of year-end accounts work to do at quite short notice. So the norm before now would be that I'd be running hopefully from one project to another. It's just trying to be a little bit patient and understanding that may not return to those levels until the new year at the moment.
No, I can well imagine. And you also talked and sort of highlighted there that Ipswich boy, you went to, I think, Hillside Primary, you said, and then on to St Joe's. What was school like for you? Were you always sort of fixated with numbers and accountancy? What was school like for you?
I love school. I've always been really, really competitive, and luckily been half decent at sport most of my life. So, and as we know, especially as a kid coming through school, if you can play some sports, that tends to be amongst boys. That is, without sounding too sexist, of course, amongst boys, that seems to get you a little bit further up the pecking order in terms of your street cred. So, but I always I always studied hard as well. My parents were really, really laid back, just let me crack on. But it was just me. I wanted to be top of the class. I wanted to be the fastest runner. I wanted to be the best at sport, which at the time was just how I was. Now I can see that maybe wasn't necessarily always a good thing for me. But so long as I was winning, I felt that it was. And at high school at St. Joe's was an all-boys school when I joined. And we had testimonials every 3 weeks. So we got graded basically every subject. We got an effort grade from A to C pretty much, and a mark out of 20. And then you were ranked in your class. And so if you were top of the class, you would be awarded your testimonial card by the headmaster in the next assembly. And the very first one, I was top of the class. So obviously I was overjoyed. I'd been working really, really hard. But then there was a massive drop off a cliff in terms of my morale and motivation when I was coming third and fifth and seventh and just desperate to get back to the top again. And it was a rugby school, very driven around rugby. So Saturday was taken up. So it's pretty much 6 days a week was devoted to school. But I thrived off it because I just got stuck in, and numbers, point to numbers, maths was always one of my stronger subjects. And I knew I didn't want to go to university. So I was always going to head towards a career that was stronger in those disciplines than others. But I did okay.
Fantastic. I think that, the sports side of things, I think that's where we stray apart. I always used to try and be the referee whenever we had a football match at school. It's the easiest way just to stand on the sideline, not do much. Now you talked about St. Joe's there, and I know that you're fortunate enough to go to St. Joe's, which is a fantastic independent school in Ipswich, who I believe is a scholarship as well. I mean, How much do you feel that going to an independent school has sort of shaped your future, perhaps more than going to a state school?
Yes, it's a funny one because depending on who I'm talking to, I kind of temper my response accordingly. But what I'm like, I'm very black and white, full stop about things. I don't know any other way. So I know from an opportunity viewpoint, it has helped me. So some people may or may not like that, but we all judge in different ways and different capacities at times. And I know with the profession that I've gotten into that not that anyone's ever sat down and said, oh, I'm giving you an extra opportunity because of your schooling. Just the reactions that you can get at times when people, if you say to someone what school you went to, if they put value in that and they see that is a good thing, that they will say, oh, excellent, you went to St. Joe's. Whereas my mindset is very much, well, I think I'd have worked hard wherever I went, but St. Joe's being an independent school of the nature that it was, it did make it easier maybe compared to other schools to study and get your head down and get on with things without any distractions from classmates, pupils, who knows. It's a hard one because I don't know what it would have been like if I'd have gone to a different school, of course, but I'm certainly grateful that my parents made sacrifices to pay the school fees because it definitely helped me and made my life easier to just study and get on the best I could.
That is a very good response. And I mean, tell me some more about the finance industry. Is it all just numbers? And also, if I'm a young person watching this or watching it back, what's your top tips to be able to get into that industry and make a good success of it?
Yeah, well, I had an email for a couple of weeks ago. It may have been somebody that you passed on my details to, from a young lady. She may be Coppleston, but obviously I won't mention names for obvious reason, who's about to start A-levels and was asking me exactly the same thing and directed towards myself and our business around apprenticeships and just a general query about advice. And so I sent quite a lengthy email just so I could qualify things because we're not at a stage in our development where we're taking on apprentices. But of course, I came that route straight from A-level, so I could at least point her in the right direction. And a lot of it for me, forget the current times we're in, because at some point we'll get through this and things will return to some level of normality. But it's really around just showing initiative and showing that you're interested. A lot of people think that accounts is that you're sat at a desk and say that's all you do, but there's no interaction with people. I've always enjoyed auditing because I get to go out to clients, I get to meet people, there'll be staff turnover, so you get to meet new people, you learn about a certain industry, a certain product. It can be anything. I'm a real geek on the learning front, that when I meet someone new and they teach me something, it doesn't matter if it's directly related to my work, that's what makes me tick. And so that's what I would encourage the young people to do, is to get stuck into things and not be too hung up and worried about, do I need to be excellent at a certain subject or another one, but having a certain level of aptitude and hard-working determination to do whatever's in front of you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. And we've just got a question in. So, do you have to be good at maths to be an accountant?
Absolutely not. And more so now. So, funny enough, I don't have a calculator on my desk. You rewind 15, 16 years, that my calculator was my best friend, mainly because I didn't want to get caught out on mental arithmetic. But with spreadsheets and the capabilities of systems now, I would say that you should feel confident in your level of maths, but at no point. So as an example, if I had a meeting with a client now or when I was younger and less experienced, there would be no point in the meeting where numbers would feature in the capacity that I'd be expected to convert percentages off the top of my head, or would be throwing new numbers and new scenarios. And because everyone likes precision and likes the answer to be right, that of course you get a few people that are walking brains and can just work things out. I worked for an FD once who was a genius, but he was a genius in all aspects. So you could sit in a meeting and he could do that, but that's not me, and that's not 99.9% of people out there.
Just on that, so an FD, that's finance director, yeah?
Yes. Cool. So maths, I think within accountancy, you'd be expected to have passed your maths at GCSE, but you certainly wouldn't need an A-level in maths. And I've worked with lots of people that went more of an artistic route, and they did A-levels in English, politics, history, whatever. And it actually pays, I think, to have people in the workforce in certain areas that aren't all driven by maths, business studies, economics, because you get more diversity in those people stuck in an audit room for however many days, that there's a bit more to it than us competing over who can calculate things the quickest.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And next question. So when did you decide to become an accountant, and why?
Well, I had the advantage. I've got an older sister who's 2 years older than me, and she got into accountancy. She wasn't for it, so she did it for 2 years and then moved on to IT and systems work. But for me, because it's almost a reverse thing. So it sounds negative now, but I wanted to figure out what I could do career-wise that would give me really good career progression, but I wouldn't have to go to uni and rack up debt. That was the thing top of the list. And at that time, the careers advice at school was absolutely rubbish. So we had a computer in an office which had a program on it, which you went and answered 100, 200 questions. And that told you what jobs you would be well matched for based on your answers. An accountant was one of them. I think actuary, accountant, I think lawyer was another one. And I can't think what the fourth one was. And so I then looked into accountancy. And once I looked at what it involved and the career path, the number of exams that you'd have to do, how long it would take for me to become qualified, and how much money I could earn, and over what sort of time scale, then that was it. So I was 16, 17 years old. So I would say quite late. I think some of the work that we've been doing with the younger people and talking to them about careers is really refreshing now, to give some younger people more of an idea about what working is really like, and to just be truthful and honest about it in terms of the career paths and what's expected, so that they can start to form an opinion around, even if they've got a list of 10 potential jobs at the age of 14 or 15, that's a better position than I would have been in years and years ago, to just think, well, I've got no idea about any jobs at all.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And, as you've brought up the topic of young people, now you volunteer with us as a enterprise advisor, and I know It's something you are incredibly passionate about. So would you be able to sort of shine a bit of light on what is an enterprise advisor and some of the stuff you've been involved in? Because I know we've both done the student boss for a day. I think that might be worth talking about.
Yeah, so I think the very first event I did was with the primary school children, which was the detective, which involved obviously groups of primary school children. I think they're 10 years old. Were they 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, about 9, 10, yeah.
So there's various people. So there's myself as an accountant, there's a policeman, hairdresser, you name it, lots of different professions. And the children had to go from table to table asking questions about your job so that they could deduce what skills you need in order to do that job. Obviously, at the end of it, what they learned from it was that it doesn't really matter what job you're doing, you need a certain level of arithmetic, communication skills, written, spoken, and so on, so that they could realize, what, the things that I'm doing at school are at least relevant and are important. And I'm not saying that a 9, 10-year-old needs to know that, but my personal view is engaging with the young people at that stage certainly makes it easier for us when they get older and more opinionated and maybe more resistant to certain levels of education. And then that's what then drew me in to become an enterprise advisor and sign on the dotted line, as it were, and have my own school. And it's been really nice to connect with the young people and let's say have my own school, but you know what I mean, to have a connection with an individual school, because I've built up really good rapport with the pupils. I can see their confidence growing, and the student boss for a day was excellent because we got the children 13, 14 years old to interview us first, partly to break down the barriers and to deal with any nerves that they might have. And so they greeted us when we arrived at the school, gave us a tour of the school, made us tea and coffee. Then we had interviews with them, and they awarded a job to obviously the candidates. And I remember you got involved in the last one, didn't you, Jordan?
Yes, because I didn't get the job and you did.
Yeah. I remember it well. But and then we reversed it. And the really good thing about that was once the kids realized that we weren't such scary people and there was nothing to really be so concerned about, they were asking when we were coming back for us to interview them, which was lovely. And I know it's been difficult because we haven't been able to go into the schools, and I think we need to find a way to back it up so that isn't lost over time. But great experience for them at that age, that they're still a number of years off entering the workplace, that they realise that maybe it's not so bad going for an interview somewhere and trying to get a job.
I'm still left scarred, actually. So no, I think it was a fantastic opportunity for them.
Next time.
There's always a next time. I mean, again, on the theme of young people, you work in finance. What sort of advice would you have to a young person around finance that I think maybe that you wish you'd known back when you were their age, say like 17, 18 years old?
I assume you in personal finance, you mean, so managing your own finances. Yes, it's a funny one. Everyone always assumes, especially my friends over the years, that accountants and anyone in this sort of profession is excellent at managing their own finances. And don't get me wrong, I am responsible and I do manage my finances well. But I was young once and I was studying, getting pay rises. I had a stage in my life when I was spending the next pay rise before I'd achieved it. And I learned my lesson from it, don't get me wrong, from putting money on credit cards and then having to transfer from one 0% credit card to another. But it wasn't the smartest way to go about it. My biggest piece of advice is to start trying to save as early as you can, particularly with pensions as well. So I only put a minimum amount into a pension at the moment, just because of the stage of my life I'm at with the young kids and trying to pay off my mortgage. But I did start a pension when I was 20, when stakeholder pensions came into force. And even just putting aside, when you start working, even if you're putting aside 10, 20%, we've all got different circumstances, which I appreciate, but the more you can put to one side early on and get used to living a lifestyle without having that money, the easier it will be as you get older. Then you get your foot on the property ladder, and of course have a huge dent when you're paying out mortgage payments, that if you were used to paying that money out into savings accounts or otherwise, then it certainly makes it a lot easier. And there's so much temptation. You can get cars on PCPs when you don't earn a huge amount of money, because it's all based on affordability. And I'm not telling people to not live your life and not have things, but my best bit of advice is almost have your thing. So if cars is your thing, then fair enough. If you can afford it, get yourself that lovely car every 3 years if that's what you want to do, but then realize and understand that something's got to give, because you can't have the car, you can't have 2 or 3 nights out a week spending X amount of pounds on, let's say on beer, but we've all been there, so we understand how things work, clothes, whatever it might be. Just try and have that self-discipline, the sooner the better, because half the people you see driving around in amazing cars, of nice things, they're not paying for it, or if they are, they're racking up debts. That isn't me being bitter. It's just me knowing how the world works and how finance works, and the fact that I've been there. I've had the nice car, I've overspent money, then I've realised, you know what, now I need to cut this, and this to rein it in and correct my bad behaviour.
That is I think that's sound advice. Thank you, Dan. And we just got a question. So, what advice would you give to a young person wishing to be self-employed, keeping records, making business plans, etc.? Because I know you've had sort of, I suppose at the stage you're at now, working, it's your business, whereas I know you've worked in huge organisations. So I think it's quite a great question for you in terms of, what's your advice?
I think best piece of advice, where I come from, I'm not in a position where I'm going to tell people how to run their business or whether what they want to do is a good idea. But I think in terms of starting up a business and becoming self-employed, the best thing you can do really is, once you know what you want to do and you've got a good idea on how much money you need to spend to start it up, how you're going to get to market, who you're going to be working with, if anyone at all, where your customers are going to come from, is sitting down to go through I'd call it more admin side of things, around whether being self-employed for you means going out alone under your own name, whether you're better off starting up as a limited company and setting up your business that way. To go and speak to an accountant. Pretty much all the accountancy firms that I know tend to do things like happy hour. So you go and sit down, you have a chat with them, or friends of friends. So if your parents know someone who's an accountant, or your friend's friend knows someone who's an accountant, then try and tap into those connections so that you can get a better idea. There's lots of accountancy software platforms like Free Agent, Xero, QuickBooks, that you can manage your records online. So that the admin side of it, in terms of the accountancy side, you can do yourself. So you don't need to be paying me or another accountant £1,000, £2,000 a year to help with your record keeping. You just need somebody to give you a bit of sound advice at the front end in order to deal with the admin and making business plans. I don't know, I've various clients that come to me and they sit down, and some of them are convinced that they know exactly what they're going to do. They can map it all out. I've worked for, like you say, multinational organizations where the business planning season, as we used to call it, would last 3-4 months and would be ongoing all the time. You wouldn't just create a business plan or a budget and leave it, and then a year later see, well, how have I done against my budget? You've got to be looking at it all the time. But it's important to have a plan, clearly, and to have budgets, but not to be restricted by them, because things change. We know that more now than ever before. But my view would be, especially when you're starting out and when you're younger, don't invest weeks and months puzzling over the perfect plan or the perfect budget, because it doesn't exist. As long as you've got a framework that works for you, and an accountant, a financial advisor, somebody, a parent doesn't need to be someone in my profession. It needs a certain amount of common sense. So I'm always more than happy to help people with those things. I'm not poo-pooing what I do, but at the same time, I think the important thing is to not get too hung up on those things and let them be a restriction to what you want to do.
That's excellent. Thank you. And you know, we talked a lot about your career, but you know, what's been some of the highs and some of the lows of your career?
Actually, the highs initially was passing my exams, just because I was desperate to get qualified, so that I felt like I need to get qualified so I could then move on and decide what I wanted to do. I got qualified, then I realised when I started to manage teams almost how little I knew. I've been working in finance and accountancy for 5 years, and I thought I was there. But yes, I'm a qualified accountant. Bit too big for my boots, to be honest, at the time. I thought I can go and do this, I can go and do that. But after that, it's just really been promotions and at times just certain levels of feedback. We've all got different things that make us tick. We want good appraisals from our bosses, from people that we respect, from our peers, and we want to know that we're doing a good job. But that comes in varying degrees, really. I had a lady who, when I left KUK years ago, who didn't work in my department, on my last day, and I'd hardly ever spoken to her, she said, "Oh, we're going to miss you, Dan, because whenever you're around, you're positive, you're energetic, and it's nice to have that buzz around a room." And that was probably the nicest thing that anyone's ever said to me in the work capacity, but had nothing to do with the 70, 80 hours that I'd worked over time, the reports that I'd churned out, or the service that I provided to care home managers, or whatever it was. And it's just an interesting one. And I always encourage young people to try and figure out what they're in it for in terms of career. So yes, we want to work. We've got bills to pay. We want to earn money. We want to get on. But not to forget your own values and why you show up for work. It doesn't have to be, and certainly in my opinion, early on shouldn't just be about the money. On each to their own, if that's what makes you tick. But I think it's good to understand yourself and why you're in the game. I've had times where I've messed things up working in large corporates, that whether it's due to resources or haven't spent enough time on something, and I've been devastated. And my bosses have sat down with me and tried to tell me it's not that big a deal, but you set a certain level of standards for yourself, and that's what tends to put pressure on me, is that I drive. Sorry, the lights just went out because I haven't moved enough in my office. I try and drive myself on, but then if I've made a mistake, I then can get quite down and get a little bit stressed at times off the back of something that really, even now, shouldn't cause that amount of stress.
Brilliant, thank you. And we just got another question, and so just very briefly, what has been your biggest lesson at work?
My biggest lesson is probably when I work for large corporates. You're in an office of maybe 200 or 300 people, and whilst I said earlier on to you that I'm very much black and white and I'm honest, I say it as it is. My biggest lesson has probably been that whilst that's important to me, and I like people to know where they stand with me, and vice versa, it's not always appropriate or necessary. So I'm not saying that you should go around lying or that you should go against your own values or whatever else it might be, but it's to have that certain level of understanding around where that other person's coming from a communication viewpoint, that me behaving and operating in a way that is important to me isn't necessarily the best way to achieve what you need to get done. That some people might call it street smarts or whatever else. I think I tend to be able to judge situations quite well, but at the same time, I think in any career, it is relationships that get you on. In accountancy, there's an expectation that you do your qualifications and you pass it, but nobody cares whether you got 50% for every exam or you got 90% at the end of the day. Once you're qualified, you're qualified. It comes more down to your own personal brand and what you're about, and making sure that you're consistent with that, so that if something does go wrong, if you have to walk away from it, you can at least hold your head up high and say, you know what, it went wrong, but that was me and it just wasn't meant to be.
That is good advice. And I mean, Something I've sort of realised during this call as well, with everything that's been going on around Black Lives Matter, and I think, sat here as, two BAME blokes who are working in professional services, we're obviously, I think working in a county like Suffolk, rural, like yourself, we've both walked into rooms when you're the only face around the table who is not white. I mean, have you ever, I suppose, seen that as perhaps a barrier? Because I know a lot of young people do. And, have you got any advice to them who may see that as a barrier?
I never have seen it as a barrier, but I know, it's because my upbringing, like you say, in the environment like this, I don't have any close friends that are of any ethnic minority. It's not because I've chosen it that way. It's just purely the pool of potential friends out there.
I thought we were mates, but fine.
I'm not going to. There's nothing I can say against that now. What I've said goes. But there have been times in my career when you're talking long before the prominence of things as they are now, where I've been sat in a room and I've thought this could be odd for someone that is bothered by it, if that makes sense. And when I worked for a company that is a subsidiary of a US business that's been around for 150 years, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And I had a trip to Stanford as part of the management induction program, which was really cool, just to go away for a couple of days and have some induction and drink beer in the evenings. But I got cornered by 3 black men and women talking about the culture in the UK. And the places that I've worked have always been fine, but I've never felt an issue or been made to feel a different way. But they very much said that it was hugely different in the States. And so I can understand a lot better now. I'm not saying there's not issues here, because clearly there are, but in terms of my experience, I've never experienced anything. And I told them at the time that I felt that some of the companies I've worked for that have been great companies, and I haven't had any issues there, that maybe I'd be more likely to get a leg up off the back of targets for diversity statistics than for merit. But then that has bothered me, because my mum said to me once, and I'm droning on a bit, my mum said to me, do you think that you've benefited from it in reverse before? And I just said, I hope not, because if I found out that I had, I'd leave and I wouldn't want the job. And I know we're talking about it from the challenges side of things, but I think when large corporates, it tends to go in cycles, doesn't it? That obviously it's really prominent now for obvious reasons, and I understand the threats in the States and things that are going on there. But you fast forward 5 years and there'll be another resurgence of it, that there's only 3% ethnic minorities BAME on the boards of listed companies. But when we look at diversity from the colour of our skin, I think that's where it's going completely wrong anyway. I was listening to a podcast recently that had a guy on who was black. He went to Oxbridge. He's on the board of a large PLC. And he said they were behind closed doors with ticking boxes saying we're improving our diversity. And he said it hasn't at all, because he was independently educated throughout his life. Parents were really well off. He got his foot in the door in lots of places off the back of that anyway. He was an Oxford or Cambridge student. So don't get me wrong, he'd obviously studied hard throughout his life, but his point was he's not adding any diversity to that room at all because of the colour of his skin. In actual fact, it's just remained the same. There's just different colours sat there. And so I feel passionate about it in that respect, because it's just not right. But at the same time, with large corporates and statistics, how else do you measure it? I think that companies have got a bigger responsibility to look at it deeper than that and say, okay, well, let's look at the schools that we recruit from, and diversity. And KPMG have been doing a lot, and I worked for KPMG about 10, 11 years ago, and they've been doing a lot at looking at the education routes and taking on more students from A levels, not just university, rather than saying, okay, well, we have thousands of applicants every year. Let's ditch any that don't have AAB or higher, just to make their lives easier. Let's look at it a different way. And it's taken a long time, in my opinion, but I'm all for that, because there's so much to be gained from making sure that we're not all sat in rooms where we've all got the same interests, the same likes. So how do we challenge each other? How does anything change? So I know I've kind of gone on a bit further than the main question, but
that was fantastic, and I think you gave such a brilliant insight, and definitely, yeah, I'm happy to close on that note, because I think you do give a great insight, and yeah, I've learned a lot just in that few minute segment. So Dan, huge thank you for coming on to Careers and Coffee. It's been a pleasure as always to get your insight into, you know, finances for a young person and the advice, skills you're expecting at work, your own experience in terms of highs and lows, and also, you know, your summary on BAME within organisations as well. So huge thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for your time, Jordan.
Good stuff. Cheers, Dan. So that was Dan English talking to us about the finance sector, his experience in mentoring young people. Really fantastic guy. Hope you all got something from that. So that is the end of this week's Careers and Coffee. As always, we have a survey underneath. So please, like 20-30 seconds, go on there, and it helps myself and Josie think about the sort of guest that you want moving forward. So it's max 30 seconds. Next week, we have on Darren Howe. So Darren, amazing guy. He's going to be talking to us about his experience in cybersecurity and work with government on all sorts of amazing projects. And then we have on Andy and Angela. So Andy is the principal of Coppelson High School in Ipswich, the largest secondary school in Suffolk. And then we have Angela Ansby, who is the chief exec of the Radbold Trust, a trust made up of alternate provision schools. So that'll be a brilliant insight into education. So tune in next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12:30 till 1. Looking forward to seeing you.